Have you ever said no to someone and then felt deeply uncomfortable about it? Picture this. You nod, you agree, but inside everything just tightens up. You do it so you won't hurt anyone, won't disappoint them, won't seem rude. You just want to keep the peace. But the truth is, you don't want to do it at all. Sometimes it feels like you're playing a part, and that forced smile only makes the disgust grow. Or maybe irritation starts building toward the other person. Or you turn that anger on yourself for being weak, for always trying to please, for not being honest. And in the end, you just give in and feel powerless. And then this cycle repeats again and again. That used to happen to me all the time until I finally figured it out. Here's what I realized. If you think you were born this way, that it's just your personality, you are wrong. A healthy reaction is being able to say no when you want to refuse without guilt or tension. And if you do compromise, it should be on equal terms, where you also get something meaningful in return, not just a one-sided game. So the real question is, why is it so hard for us to say no to protect what we truly want? Let's dig into that. But first, a quick note. Of course, there are times when you really do have to keep your word, or when saying no would put someone in a truly difficult spot. Or maybe you're the only one who can help and it genuinely matters. I'm not talking about selfishness or indifference, and I am definitely not saying you can just drop everything and everyone whenever your mood shifts. No, what I'm talking about are those other situations, the ones where you're being used, where it happens simply because you don't know how to say no, because you're afraid of hurting someone, or because you feel like you always have to be the ease, accommodating one. To really understand why it can be so hard to say no, let me tell you a story about someone I know. We'll call him Sam. That's not his real name, but that doesn't matter. Sam grew up in a wealthy family. His parents gave him everything. Everyone around them thought his mother was incredibly caring. She always made sure the kids had all they needed. They ate well, went to the best schools, spent their vacations skiing or relaxing by the sea. On the surface, life looked perfect. You'd expect Sam to grow up happy, confident, full of joy. But here's the strange thing. He almost always looked sad. He was quiet, withdrawn, anxious, and sometimes he'd even lash out with sudden bursts of aggression. Why? What went wrong? His mother took care of everything. She even set up piano lessons, hoping she'd grow into a cultured, accomplished young man. She wanted him to have the perfect resume for college. Sam hated those piano lessons. Honestly, he hated this whole perfect life, but he couldn't say no to his parents. The moment he tried, his mom would remind him how much effort she put into raising him, how exhausted she was, how much she worried about him. His dad would call him lazy and ungrateful, repeating again and again how hard they both worked to give him a comfortable, happy life. Sam couldn't bear the thought of upsetting them. He felt he had to live up to their sacrifices. After all, what was his bad mood compared to the disappointment he brought his parents? His dad would go silent, walking around the house with that heavy, resentful air. His mom would sometimes even get sick, and he knew it was because of him. How could he be so selfish? He told himself he had to be a good boy, a good son. He couldn't let the people closest to him suffer. and more than anything, he wanted his parents' love. But if he didn't do what they asked, would they love him less? Maybe stop loving him altogether. You might say a lot of kids went through something like this. In a way, Sam was even lucky, because his friend Mark had it worse. When Mark refused to do something, his parents yelled at him. They punished him, threatened him, scared him into obedience. And Mark became meek as a lamb. Sam's parents, on the other hand, never once raised their voice at him. He was supposed to be happy, yet somehow he wasn't. The truth is, from childhood, we're trained to be convenient, to fit into someone else's strategies, someone else's patterns. And those patterns don't just shape us, they follow us into adulthood and start running our lives. We get so used to them that we mistake them for our own nature, our own character. But that's a lie. We were taught to be compliant at home and at school. The problem is, we started acting that way with everyone. We were taught to obey our elders, and now we struggle to say no to anyone at all. A child can split people into groups. These are the ones I have to obey. These are the ones I don't. For a child, all adults, all authority figures merge into a single category. The people whose love and approval their safety depend on. When parents or teachers constantly demand obedience, compliance, and silence, the child learns one thing. Resistance means danger, punishment, or losing affection. And that fear sticks. They never get the chance to experience that you can say no and still be safe, still be loved and accepted. So later in adult life, the habit spills over to everyone. Inside, the same old mechanism switches on. If I refuse, I'll be rejected, punished, abandoned. Even when reality is different, even when the other person is just a colleague or an acquaintance, the mind reacts as if it's still the child. And when the moment comes to say no, we feel a lump in our throat. The body tenses. Sometimes the head even starts to ache. That's exactly what happened to Sam as an adult. Over time, he learned to anticipate what people wanted from him before they even asked. He never stopped to think, but what do I want? Because for him, that question didn't even make sense. At work, he always took on more than everyone else, simply because he couldn't bring himself to say no to his boss. And it wasn't just about helping. He wanted to be the best, the most useful, the most reliable. After all, who else could handle everything if not him? In his personal life, it was the same story. He went along with inconveniences, bent himself to fit other people's plans just to avoid upsetting his partner. He was terrified of losing love, desperate to keep everyone happy. And what's surprising is that his friend Mark ended up the same way. They grew up in such different families, yet they carried the very same patterns. So what's really happening here? Are Sam's actions justified since in some way he does get something out of his good behavior? The French philosopher Michel Foucault explained this perfectly. Imagine we don't just live in a certain country or city. We all live inside an invisible but powerful system, one built over centuries. And who built it? We did. Humanity needed a way to survive, to organize life, and so we created the system. a framework designed to shape our behavior. It lays out our duties, our roles, how we should live, how we should interact, what we should want, even what we should think. And the system is everywhere. It isn't just at the top, in governments or institutions. It runs through our schools, our families, our workplaces. According to Michel Foucault, the power that once ruled us from the outside has now settled inside us, and we don't even realize it. We like to think society has become more human. There's no king, no inquisition, no soldiers, no guillotine keeping us obedient through fear. Instead, this is the civilized form of control. That's why we have schools where we taught to follow rules, medicine and psychiatry deciding what's normal and what isn't, psychology measuring how well we fit the standard. And all of this is reinforced through the family, where the real training happens. And what about parents? They're simply repeating the same patterns drilled into them by their own parents, by society itself. This is how the system defines not only what counts as normal, but also how we should act, how we should look, what we should feel, and what we should believe is right. And when you step outside those lines, the punishment comes quickly. Judgment, shame, isolation, losing your job, diagnosis, and of course, loneliness. Take something as ordinary as this. After work, all your colleagues head to the bar, but you're exhausted and just want to go home. Still, you are afraid to say no, because that's not how it's done. You're afraid they'll think you are unfriendly, or worse, that you secretly dislike them. You don't want to seem antisocial or strange, not like everyone else. So you go alone, trailing after the group, all the while dreaming of your couch and pillow. So, what do we do with all this? Michel Foucault believed that one person fighting the system is pointless. What really matters is learning to see where the real you begins and where the patterns implanted in you take over. You have to separate yourself from the system's demands, which sadly we've been taught to mistake for parts of our own identity. With time, you start noticing when you're living by someone else's script. You begin to see which feelings are truly yours, personal, genuine, and which ones were imposed on you. And here's the simple thought. Sit down and ask yourself, what does it even mean to be normal, good, worthy? These standards have shifted throughout history. What was seen as normal in the ancient world could spark horror and disgust in the Middle Ages, and the other way around. Once the heads of criminals were put on public display. Ancient Romans collected urine and used to wash clothes. And no, that's not a joke, that's a historical fact. All of it was considered normal at the time. And it's not hard to imagine our descendants looking back at the early 21st century with the same mix of shock and disgust, telling stories about the way we lived day to day. So ask yourself, maybe it's time to reclaim the power to say no, calmly, clearly, without shame. Maybe it's time to stop living the way the system demands and start living the way you want. If this speaks to you, share it in the comments. Have you ever agreed to something just to keep someone's approval, only to lose yourself in the process? Thanks for watching.